I nearly spilled my coffee cup when I opened the letter from the lawyer. Congratulations, you've inherited your Uncle Henry's storage facility on Birch Lane, the letter read. I handed the will to my wife Emily, as she sipped her coffee at our kitchen table in Pinewood Grove, Oregon. She choked, coughing hard. What? Uncle Henry left you what? Emily wiped coffee from her chin, her eyes wide. I shrugged, holding the heavy letter. I know it's weird, I said, still processing the news myself. It's that little warehouse with the red roof, the one we always drive past on the way to the grocery store. Emily set her cup down, staring at me. Well, that's different. What are you going to do with a storage facility? I sighed, pulling the property photos from the envelope. The warehouse wasn't big, 5,000 square feet, 20 separate units, a small office, chain-link fencing around it. It needed paint, maybe a new roof, but Uncle Henry had kept it in decent shape. Sell it, I guess. I said, might be enough to fix the kitchen like you've wanted. Emily tilted her head, thinking. Or you could keep it, people always need storage, could bring in steady money each month. Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. I got up, opened the door, and found Susan Hayes, the Pinewood Grove HOA president, standing there. Her blonde hair gleamed, undisturbed by the breeze, her smile wide but not reaching her eyes. James, I just heard about your inheritance. How exciting, Susan said, her voice overly enthusiastic. I frowned. Where'd you hear that? Susan stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, clutching a mug of tea Emily poured. Perfect timing, she said, settling at the kitchen table. The HOA's been scrambling for a place to store seasonal decorations and maintenance gear. The community shed's about to collapse. I glanced at Emily, who gave a slight shrug. That's too bad, I said cautiously. Susan leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. Have you considered letting the HOA use a small part of your warehouse? It'd really help the community. I didn't know yet that this decision would turn my life into a nightmare. The next morning, I decided to drive to Birch Lane to check out the warehouse Uncle Henry left me. Emily insisted on coming, saying she wanted to see this surprise legacy for herself. We parked in front of the storage facility, and I had to admit, it looked worse than I remembered. The red roof was faded, patched with rust stains. The chain-link fence around the 5,000 square foot lot sagged in spots, and weeds choked the entrance. But the 20 storage units stood silent, like aging soldiers, still intact. Uncle Henry definitely wasn't big on upkeep, I said, stepping out of the car. Emily giggled, covering her mouth. Looks like a horror movie set. You sure this isn't haunted? I shot her a look, but couldn't help grinning back. We walked in through the main gate, the smell of old metal and dust hitting my nose. Inside, I found a small office in the corner, wooden desk, rotting chair with a broken leg, and a few dusty cardboard boxes. It needs work, I said, flipping through papers on the desk. But he kept it solid, in his way. Emily nodded, looking around. Sell it, and be done, James. We could fix the kitchen, maybe even get new flooring. I paused, thinking. It wasn't a bad idea, our kitchen had been falling apart for years, and Emily deserved a decent cooking space. But then I remembered her comment from last night. You were right about renting it out, I replied. People in Pinewood Grove always need storage. With some fixes, it could bring in steady cash. Emily shrugged. Sure, but you'd have to invest first. Are you ready to put in the effort? Before I could answer, I spotted a small box under the desk. I pulled it out. Inside were old ledgers and yellowed papers. A scrap fell loose, Uncle Henry's scrawled handwriting. Don't trust Pinewood, they'll take it all if you're not careful. I frowned, showing it to Emily. What's this about? She asked, her voice shaky. I snorted. Probably him griping about something. He hated the suits on the Pinewood Grove Council. But deep down, I started feeling uneasy. Uncle Henry wasn't one for jokes. I dug further, finding maintenance receipts for the warehouse from a decade ago, and a property map. Look at this, I said, pointing at the map. The warehouse sits right on the edge of Pinewood Grove, near vacant land. Emily tilted her head. What's that mean? Not sure, I said, folding the paper, but Susan showed up fast. What does she want with this old place? Emily crossed her arms. You're overthinking it. Maybe she really just needs space for Christmas stuff. I wanted to believe that, but Uncle Henry's warning echoed in my head. I tucked the scrap in my pocket, deciding to hold on to it for later. Let's go, I said to Emily. I need to think more before signing anything with Susan. As we left, I glanced back at the warehouse. It wasn't just property, it was hiding something, and I had a feeling I was about to step into deep trouble. A few days after visiting the warehouse, I still hadn't decided what to do with Uncle Henry's surprise legacy. Emily kept mentioning the kitchen remodel, while I started leaning toward renting it out for real. But that note in the box, "Don't trust Pinewood," kept nagging at me. I was about to dig back into Uncle's papers when the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Susan Hayes standing there, still with that too-perfect smile. Her blonde hair shone, unruffled, despite the breeze blowing through Pinewood Grove. "James," she chirped. "Just stopping by to check in. How's the storage facility?" "You sure heard about the inheritance fast," I said, frowning slightly. Susan waved a hand, stepping inside uninvited. "Word travels quick around here. Mind if I come in?" Before I could answer, she was at the kitchen table, cradling a mug of tea Emily poured reluctantly. Emily shot me a look that said, "Watch out." Susan set her mug down, leaning toward me. "Perfect timing," she said, her voice syrupy. "The HOA's desperate for a spot to store seasonal decorations and maintenance gear. The shed behind the clubhouse is about to collapse." I crossed my arms, cautious. "That's a shame," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Susan nodded, her eyes gleaming like she'd just had an idea, though I'd bet she'd planned it already. "I was thinking," she went on. "Would you consider letting the HOA use a small part of your warehouse? Just one unit, to help the community. It'd be a lifesaver for us." I glanced at Emily, who gave a tiny shrug, like "up to you." It sounded reasonable, 1 unit out of 20, temporarily. I hadn't decided on selling or renting yet, so it wouldn't cost me anything. "I guess that's fine," I said slowly. "Just 1 unit, for the HOA to use until I figure things out. 3 months. Susan clapped her hands, grinning wide. "Fantastic, a 3-month deal to start. You're so generous, James, the community will be so grateful." She stood, gripping my hand harder than necessary. "I'll have Mark, my husband, bring the official contract over tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll handle everything." She left, leaving behind a whiff of perfume, and a sinking feeling in my gut. Emily shut the door, turning to me with a skeptical look. "Real generous of you," she said, a hint of sarcasm in her tone. "It's just 1 unit, I replied, trying to reassure myself. "Temporary. What's the worst that could happen?" Emily crossed her arms. Didn't she seem a little too eager? "Susan's known for controlling everything in Pinewood Grove." I shrugged, but inside, I was starting to worry. Uncle Henry's warning rang again, "Don't trust Pinewood." How did Susan know about the warehouse so fast? And why did she care so much about an old place like that? I sank onto the couch, pulling the note from my pocket to reread it. "Maybe I am overthinking it," I said to Emily. Though I didn't believe myself. "She just needs space for Christmas stuff, right?" Emily shook her head. "With Susan Hayes, nothing's that simple. Read anything you sign with her carefully." That night, I tossed and turned, picturing the warehouse on Birch Lane. I'd agreed too quickly, not asking more about the HOA's collapsing shed. Susan said Mark would bring a contract, but I hadn't seen a single paper yet. It felt like I'd just opened the door to something bigger than I'd bargained for. I told myself I'd check the warehouse again tomorrow. Look for anything off. But deep down, I knew my kindness to Susan might be the biggest mistake I'd ever made. 3 days after agreeing with Susan, I decided to drive out to Birch Lane to see how the warehouse was holding up. I wanted to check it before Mark brought the contract, make sure everything was still fine. But as I turned onto the familiar road, I slammed on the brakes so hard the seatbelt dug into my chest. In front of me, the quiet warehouse had turned into a war zone. Trucks, cars, even an SUV towing a boat clogged the entrance. Neighbors, people I'd only glimpsed at the grocery store, were unloading stuff like it was National Moving Day. Sofas, cardboard boxes, an old bike, and a whole patio set were piled haphazardly by the chain-link fence. I parked on the roadside, heart pounding, and pushed through the crowd. In the middle of the chaos, Susan Hayes stood with a clipboard, directing like a deck officer. "Put that chair in Unit 3, she yelled at a sweaty guy. I shouted over the noise, "Susan, what the hell is going on here?" She turned, beaming like nothing was wrong. "Oh James, isn't this great? I told everyone about our deal. The community's so thankful. Our deal was 1 unit for HOA stuff." I growled, pointing at a guy shoving a motorcycle into Unit 6. Susan shrugged, like I was overreacting. "Technically, yes," she said. "But when I announced it at last night's emergency meeting, people got so excited. We realized this warehouse could solve so many storage problems in Pinewood Grove." My jaw dropped as I looked around. Old Lady Ellen from down the street was stacking Christmas decorations in Unit 12. The high school basketball coach was piling gym equipment into 15. Someone had even slapped handwritten name tags on most of the doors. "Susan, you can't do this," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She ignored me, rattling on. "The Millers are moving, need a temporary spot. The Browns are renovating their basement. Mr. Jenkins needs a place for his summer car." I spun around, seeing Mark, Susan's husband, backing a truck up the main path. In the bed were a patio set, and something that looked like an antique pinball machine. "Stop," I yelled, stepping in his way. "This isn't what I agreed to." Susan came closer, lowering her voice, gripping my arm tight. "James, calm down. The HOA met yesterday, and amended the bylaws. All shared facilities have to be open to dues-paying members. You offered this as a community resource, so people have a right to use it." She shoved a printed sheet into my hand, bold red title, Bylaw Amendment 47.3. Community Storage Access Rights. I skimmed it, seeing equity and entitlement repeated over and over. "This can't be legal," I stammered. "I own this warehouse. It's not even in the HOA boundaries." "Actually," Susan said sweetly, "Mark checked the county maps. The boundary line runs exactly 8 feet into your property. It's ours." I stood frozen, watching Ellen arrange more Christmas lights, the coach stack more weights. Susan patted my shoulder, her tone patronizing. "James, you're making a scene. Think how it'd look if you pulled back this generous offer after people moved in? Not very community-spirited." I turned, spotting Linda Brooks, the one who fines me for trash can placement, standing nearby, arms crossed. "Problem?" she asked, her tone daring me. I cleared my garage for new gym equipment. "You can't back out now." 20 pairs of eyes locked on me, waiting. This wasn't just Susan anymore. These were people I saw at block parties, whose kids played with mine. I lowered my voice, trying to stay calm. "We'll talk later, Susan. But this isn't what I signed up for." Walking back to my car, I clenched the amendment paper. My kindness had turned into a free-for-all, and according to this sheet, I had no power to stop it. I knew I had to do something, but right then I was trapped in the mess I'd accidentally unleashed. I drove back from the warehouse in a daze, still gripping Susan's bylaw amendment. My warehouse, the one I'd just wanted to help out with a little, had become a public dumping ground, and I'd stood there powerless. When I got home to Pinewood Grove, I tossed my keys on the table, and flopped onto the couch. Emily walked in from the kitchen, seeing my face. "What's wrong?" she asked. I told her everything, the trucks, the boat, Susan with her clipboard, and the paper claiming I'd lost control. Emily crossed her arms, frowning. I told you. Susan wasn't stopping at one unit. I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere. I need to check Uncle Henry's stuff again, I said, standing up. Emily looked puzzled. What, now? You just said you can't get into the warehouse anymore. No, the stuff here, I replied, heading straight to the attic. I remembered bringing home a box of papers from the warehouse office the other day. Stuff I hadn't fully gone through. I dragged it down, dust flying everywhere. Emily followed, sitting cross-legged on the floor. What are you looking for? Not sure, I said, pulling out a stack of old ledgers. But Uncle Henry's note, "Don't trust Pinewood," doesn't sound like a joke anymore. I opened a leather-bound notebook, Uncle Henry's messy scrawl jumping out. He wasn't an easy guy. I remembered being 12, when he'd call me to the warehouse to fix fencing. "Hold the hammer steady, James," he'd growl when I dropped it. But then he'd sit with me on a crate, talking about his days as a mechanic, living alone in Pinewood Grove. He hated the local officials, called them suits who just eat money. Once I saw him chase some polo shirt guys off the warehouse yard with a garden hose. "Land developers," he muttered. "Want to buy cheap and build big." In the notebook, I found entries from 20 years back. March 14, 2003, guy from Pinewood Realty came, offered 50 grand for the warehouse. I said no. He said I'd regret it. I read it aloud to Emily, my pulse quickening. Below he'd added, "They control the council, control the HOA. Don't let them take yours, James." I stopped, looking at Emily. He knew something, I said. "Susan doesn't just want the warehouse for Christmas stuff, there's more to it." Emily frowned. "Like what?" I flipped further, finding a folded scrap, an old hand-drawn property map. There was Birch Lane, my warehouse on the edge of Pinewood Grove, next to a big vacant lot Uncle had circled in red. He'd written, "They want this, warehouse is the way in." I pointed at it. "Look, if Susan and Mark control the warehouse, they might be tied to that land next door." Emily leaned in. "You mean they're after real estate development? But why go through all this trouble?" "Good question," I said, folding the map. "But Uncle Henry refused to sell, and now I've got the warehouse. Maybe they've been waiting for this chance." I recalled Susan's words, Mark checked the county maps, and how she'd gripped my hand too hard. "They amended the bylaws too fast," I said. "Like it was planned." Emily nodded slowly. "So what do you do now? They've already taken over the warehouse." I held the "Don't Trust Pinewood" note, feeling like Uncle Henry was talking straight to me. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm not letting them take what's mine that easily. He held on to it for 20 years, and I'll figure out why." I stuffed the notebook back in the box and stood. "Tomorrow, I'm going back to the warehouse, see what they're doing. If there's a scheme, I'll dig it up." Emily sighed. "Be careful, James. Susan doesn't play fair." I nodded, but inside, I was set. Uncle Henry didn't leave me the warehouse just to give up. I had no idea trusting him would drag me into a fight bigger than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, I woke up determined to figure out what was really going on with my warehouse. Susan and her HOA crew had turned it into theirs too fast, and Uncle Henry's notes wouldn't let me sit still. I called to Emily from the kitchen. "I'm heading to the Pinewood Grove Library. Want to come?" She stepped out, coffee mug in hand, frowning. "The library? For what?" I held up Uncle Henry's hand-drawn map. "I need to check the property lines, and see if Susan's telling the truth about the warehouse being in HOA territory. Something's off." Emily nodded slowly. "Okay, you need someone level-headed with you. But don't do anything stupid." We got to the library. A small brick building in the heart of Pinewood Grove. Inside, the smell of old books and the hum of a photocopier greeted us. Ruth, the silver-haired librarian, looked up from the desk. James Carter, been a while. What do you need today? I gave a tight smile. Hey Ruth, I need county map records and anything on the property on Birch Lane. Ruth raised an eyebrow. Henry's warehouse, I heard you inherited it. Word really did travel fast. Ruth led us to a computer corner, tapping a few keys. Here, she said, pointing at the screen. A map popped up, sharper than Uncle Henry's sketch. There was Birch Lane, my warehouse on the edge of Pinewood Grove, right by the big vacant lot he'd circled. Ruth dragged the cursor. The HOA boundary runs like this. She traced a red line and I froze. The warehouse sat outside it by nearly 12 feet. Susan lied, I whispered. She said Mark checked the maps, that it's in HOA territory. It's not, Emily leaned in. So they have no claim to it. Ruth nodded. Not unless there's paperwork you haven't seen. But there's more. She pulled up another file, a violation notice from the county to the Pinewood Grove HOA. 3 times last year, Ruth read aloud. Improper equipment storage. They need a legal spot, or they're fined $120,000. Deadline's this Tuesday. My face heated up. This Tuesday. That's days away. Emily grabbed my arm. James, they need your warehouse to dodge that fine. This isn't random. I looked at Ruth. Anything else? She flipped through pages. Got a quote here. Day before you inherited, the HOA got a $50,000 bid to build a new shed from Triad Construction. I frowned. Who's Triad Construction? Ruth shrugged. No idea, but the quote went straight to Susan Hayes. I turned to Emily. She came to our house right after I inherited. They'd planned this. Emily nodded. But why not just build new? Why target your warehouse? That question made me think of the vacant lot on Uncle Henry's map. Hold on, I said, pulling it from my pocket. He circled this area, said they want this. If the warehouse is the gateway, maybe they need it for something bigger, like development. Ruth frowned. You mean land expansion? That vacant lot's privately owned, but I've heard rumors the council wants to grow Pinewood Grove. Emily cut in. And the HOA's their inside track. I nodded, pieces clicking together. Susan's not just avoiding a fine. She wants the warehouse to control that land next door. I turned to Ruth. Any way to see who owns the vacant lot? She typed for a minute, then shook her head. Needs an official request. But I'd bet Mark Hayes is tied in. He used to work in city planning. I clenched my fists. They played me from the start. Emily pulled me back. What now? They've already taken the warehouse. I took a deep breath. I'm going back there, see what they're hiding in those units. If there's proof, I'll use it. Ruth handed me printouts of the map and violation notices. Careful, James, she said. The HOA here has money and connections. Don't let them crush you. Leaving the library, I felt anger and resolve mixing. Uncle Henry was right, don't trust Pinewood. Susan wasn't just taking my warehouse to dodge a fine. She was in a bigger game, and I'd stumbled into it. I stuffed the papers in my pocket, looking at Emily. I'm not letting them win this easy. Uncle held that warehouse 20 years, and I'll fight to keep it. She gave a faint smile. You've got a plan brewing. Just don't lose, okay? I left the library with my head spinning, clutching the map printout and violation notices from Ruth. Susan had lied. The warehouse wasn't in HOA territory, and they needed it to avoid a $120,000 fine by Tuesday. I knew I had to act, but before I could plan, trouble hit. The next morning at 6:17, the scream of a chainsaw ripped through Pinewood Grove. I bolted out of bed, racing to the window. 3 guys in yellow vests were cutting down the 40-year-old maple in my front yard. The tree Emily and I hung a swing on for the kids, the one that shaded countless summers. I ran outside in my pajamas, barefoot, yelling, "Stop, what are you doing to my tree?" A guy in a hard hat stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "Emergency removal order from the HOA, sir. This tree's marked as hazardous." I snatched the paper from him. The inspection report, dated yesterday, was signed by Susan Hayes. "Damaged roots, threatening the sidewalk and power lines. Hazardous, my ass." I roared. "I checked it last spring, it was perfectly fine." He shrugged. "We've got authorization. Take it up with the HOA." I stood there, helpless, watching the maple branches fall like pieces of memory. Emily rushed out, eyes wide. "James, why are they doing this?" I gritted my teeth. "Retaliation, because I know too much." I called to her from the yard, my voice shaking as another big branch crashed down. "The kid's tree, Emily, pure revenge." She grabbed my hand, but I didn't wait. I jumped in the car, still in pajamas, and drove straight to Susan's, a pristine white colonial with a perfectly trimmed hedge on Elm Street. I pounded on the door, heart racing. Susan opened it, dressed in tennis gear, racket in hand. "James, what's so urgent this early?" "Don't play dumb," I said through clenched teeth. "My tree, the one my kids grew up with, you had it cut down. Why?" Susan tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Oh, what an awful situation. But the inspection found a serious safety issue. We couldn't risk it falling and hurting someone." I stepped closer. "It was fine until I uncovered your warehouse scam. This is payback." Her smile stiffened. "Careful with accusations, James. That could be slander." She glanced at her watch. "I'm late for tennis. Oh, by the way, I measured your fence yesterday. It's 6 inches over code. Expect a notice." She brushed past me to her car, leaving me standing there, hands trembling with rage. When I got home, my beautiful maple was just a lonely stump. Emily stood in the yard, eyes red. 40 years old, she whispered. "We took so many family photos under it." I hugged her, but inside, anger flared like fire. Susan wasn't just taking the warehouse, she was targeting my life. The next day, a violation notice was taped to our door. "Fence height exceeded, $150 fine." I tore it down, but that wasn't the end. The day after, more notices arrived. "Unapproved mailbox design, $100 fine." Then excess bird feeders, $75 fine. Unauthorized garden stones, $50 fine. And house number non-compliant, $80 fine. I tossed the stack on the kitchen table, looking at Emily. "They're trying to bankrupt us," she said, voice trembling. "Just because you dared ask about the warehouse." I nodded, jaw clenched. "Susan's sending a message, don't cross her." But I wasn't the only target. Vijay Sharma, the guy down the street, called me that night. "James, I got 6 violation notices in 3 days, tall grass, wind chimes, just for asking Susan about the warehouse at the mailbox." I balled my hands into fists. "She thinks she can bully us into submission." Emily put a hand on my shoulder. "What now, James? They've got money and power. How do you fight that?" I looked at the maple stump through the window, recalling Uncle Henry's words. "Don't let them take yours." "I don't know," I said, voice firm, "but I'm not giving up. Uncle held the warehouse against developers for 20 years, and I'll find a way to take back what's mine." I picked up the library map. "Tomorrow, I'm going back to the warehouse. If they want to play dirty, I'll play harder." Emily sighed. "What if you lose?" I gave a faint smile. "Then at least I lose my way." After the maple incident, and the flood of violation notices, I knew I couldn't take on Susan alone. She had money, connections, and clearly no qualms about playing dirty. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Uncle Henry's map and the library papers, trying to figure out a counterattack. Emily walked in, phone in hand. "Vijay just called again," she said. "He wants to meet you, says it's important." I frowned. Vijay Sharma, the guy down the street fined for asking Susan about the warehouse, wasn't someone I knew well. "Important how?" I asked. Emily shrugged. "He said come to his place now." I grabbed my jacket and drove a few blocks to Vijay's. He opened the door, eyes red like he hadn't slept, and waved me in. His house was small but cozy, the smell of curry lingering in the air. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice urgent. "I heard about your tree. Susan's targeting you now." I nodded, sitting on the couch. "You got hit with fines for asking about the warehouse too, right?" VJ gave a bitter laugh. 6 notices in 3 days. But that's not all, I've got something you need to see. He grabbed his laptop and opened an email file. I do IT for a company in Portland, VJ explained. Last month, I stumbled into the HOA's internal system while fixing the clubhouse network. Look at this. I leaned in, an email from Susan to Mark, subject Birch Lane plan. It read, Carter's warehouse is the key. If we control it, we unlock the Triad project. Don't let him suspect. My blood ran hot. Triad construction, I whispered. Ruth at the library said the HOA got a quote from them to build a new shed, right before I inherited. VJ nodded. Not a new shed, Triad's Mark's brother-in-law's company. They want to build a housing development on the vacant land next to your warehouse, but the main access is through Birch Lane, through your warehouse. If the HOA gets it, they control the whole project. I clenched my fists. Uncle Henry wrote about this. He refused to sell to developers 20 years ago. VJ scrolled to another email. Here's more. Susan told Mark to fake the boundary maps to say the warehouse is HOA property. They know it's outside their lines, but they wanted you to believe it wasn't. I stood up, pacing. So they've been scamming me from the start, not just to dodge the $120,000 fine, but to grab the land for Triad. VJ nodded. I asked Susan at the mailbox last week about them using your warehouse. She threatened me, told me to shut up or lose my house. Then the fines hit. I looked at him, feeling both nuke and gratitude. Why show me this? You could have stayed quiet. VJ gave a sad smile. I came to America from India 10 years ago for a peaceful life, not to be bullied. You're standing up, so I want to help. I sat back down, mind racing. You kept these emails? VJ nodded. Of course, I backed them up. I took a deep breath. So we've got proof Susan and Mark are frauds, but it's not enough to topple them yet. They've got the warehouse, and I need to prove they're doing wrong inside it. VJ frowned. What do you mean? I want to set a trap, I said, voice steady. If they're using the warehouse to hide stuff, Triad documents, plans, I'll catch them red-handed. VJ tilted his head. How? They've changed all the locks. I smirked. You know how to get into their system. Are there old cameras in the warehouse? Can you rig them? VJ's eyes lit up. There are a few in your uncle's old office. I can hack them if they still work, but it's risky. I nodded. I know, but Susan cut down my tree, fined you and me for asking questions. I'm not letting her win that easy. Emily, who'd been listening silently through my phone on speaker, cut in. James, you sure? If they catch you, they'll sue you back. I looked at VJ. I'm sure. VJ's the ally I need. If we catch Susan and Mark doing something shady in the warehouse, we can take it to the county. VJ tapped the table. I'm in, but we've got to move fast before Tuesday when the fine deadline hits. Leaving VJ's, I felt relief for the first time in days. I wasn't alone anymore. Uncle Henry kept the warehouse from developers, and now I had VJ to fight Susan. I tucked the printed emails from VJ in my pocket and drove home. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll take back what's mine, one step at a time. After meeting VJ, I knew I had to act fast. Tuesday, the HOA's $120,000 fine deadline was just days away, and Susan wouldn't sit still knowing I had her emails. I got home and called VJ right away. We set the trap tonight, I said over the phone. If Susan and Mark are using the warehouse to hide Triad stuff, I want cameras to catch it. VJ agreed. I checked. The old cameras in the warehouse office still work. I'll turn them on remotely. Meet me there at 10. Emily overheard, arms crossed. James, you're crazy. If they catch you, you're done. I looked at her, voice firm. They cut down our tree, took my warehouse, and scammed the neighborhood. I'm not letting them get away. She sighed, but her eyes softened. Then you need a distraction. I'll call Susan, pretend I want to smooth things over. Invite her to a BBQ tonight at the Browns. I grinned. You're brilliant. Keep her busy so VJ and I can work. At 10 sharp, I met VJ at the corner of Birch Lane, a few hundred yards from the warehouse. He carried a black bag with a laptop and some tools inside. The office cameras run on weak Wi-Fi, he whispered. I need to get inside to activate them. You keep watch. I nodded, heart pounding. The night was pitch black, only a faint moon lighting the chain link fence. We slipped through the gate, now locked with the HOA's new padlock, but VJ used bolt cutters to snip a small hole in a hidden corner. Its skills aren't just typing, he winked. Inside the warehouse was eerily quiet. Neighbors' stuff filled the units, but Uncle Henry's small office stayed empty. VJ opened his laptop, linking to the old cameras mounted on the ceiling. Done, he said after 10 tense minutes. They're recording in night mode, streaming straight to my machine. If Susan and Mark bring anything in, we'll see it. I looked around, spotting a few new crates near the door, handwritten labels, HOA records. Check this, I whispered. They're already hiding stuff, VJ nodded. Add one here. He rigged a tiny camera to a shelf, camouflaging it with an old tape box. We just finished when my phone buzzed, a text from Emily. Susan's at the BBQ. She's suspicious, but I've got her stalled. Hurry. I texted back, almost done. Thanks. VJ shut his laptop and stood. Now what? Now I pretend to back off, I said. If Susan thinks I'm giving up, she'll get cocky and slip. We left the warehouse, patching the fence hole with temporary wire. On the drive home, I drafted an email to all Pinewood Grove residents. After consideration, I've decided to fully allow the community to use the warehouse. Thanks to the HOA for their support. The next morning, I checked replies. Linda Brooks, the one who'd find me, messaged thanks James. I'll reorganize the warehouse to keep it neat. I smirked. Go ahead, I replied, knowing the cameras would catch everything. VJ called at 9. Your email loosened Susan up. She just texted Mark. I hacked their messages. They're bringing more stuff tonight. I gripped the phone. Perfect. Cameras ready? Ready, he said. But be careful, if they spot them, we're toast. That night, I sat with VJ at his place, eyes glued to the laptop screen. At 11:43 p.m., truck headlights sliced through the dark on Birch Lane. Susan and Mark stepped out, carrying crates labeled financial records. The night vision cameras caught it clear. Susan whispered, if they find the Triad invoices, we're sunk. Blame the old board if we have to. Mark nodded, stashing the crate in Unit 8. No one'll suspect. Carter's given up. I clenched my jaw, turning to VJ. They think I'm out. We've got them. VJ saved the video, voice shaky. This is proof of fraud and the Triad scheme. Now what? I took a deep breath. Now I take this to the HOA meeting. But it's got to be quiet. Invite everyone without Susan knowing I called it. VJ nodded. I'll send an anonymous text to residents. Say HOA fees are jumping 20%. Tell them to come to the library tomorrow. I gave a thin smile. Susan won't see it coming. She cut my tree, but I'll cut her power chair out from under her. Emily got home at midnight, face weary. Susan bragged at the BBQ that you're cooperating. She's smug as hell. I hugged her. Good. Smug's her weakness. Tomorrow she falls. VJ sent me the video file through a secure email. I watched it again, hearing Susan's voice in the night, confident, but about to lose. Uncle Henry kept the warehouse from developers, and now I had a shot to protect it, not just for me, but for all of Pinewood Grove. With the video from VJ, I knew it was time to strike the final blow. Susan and Mark thought I'd surrendered, but they were in for a shock. The next morning, VJ sent an anonymous text to every Pinewood Grove household. HOA fees up 20%. Come to the library at 7 p.m. to find out why. I called Emily. Get ready. Tonight I end this. She frowned. You sure Susan could turn it around? I nodded. She's been smug too long. I've got the video, VJ, and the truth. I arrived at the library early, bringing the laptop and a projector VJ borrowed from his company. Ruth greeted me at the door. Meeting room set, James. Residents are piling in. I looked around. Rows of chairs filled up, murmurs spreading. People who rarely showed at meetings. Mr. Jenkins, Old Lady Ellen, the Millers were there, curious about the fee hike text. VJ stood in the corner, checking the setup, nodding at me. Video's cued. Don't let Susan cut you off. I smirked. She won't get the chance. At 7, Susan walked in, her face tightening when she saw the crowd. Mark trailed behind, tugging his collar like he was choking. Susan clapped her hands, trying to take control. Before we start, she said, forcing a smile, I want to thank James Carter for generously letting the community use his warehouse, a shining example. A few clapped weakly, but I caught VJ's eye. It was time. Actually, I stood, voice ringing out. I want to clarify what I gave the community. Susan jumped in. We need to stick to the agenda, James. But Ruth cut in from the back. I think folks want to hear him, Susan, especially before voting on a 20% fee hike. The room went silent, all eyes on me. I stepped forward, plugging the laptop into the projector. I didn't give my warehouse to the HOA, I said clearly. I'm giving the community something more valuable, the truth about where your money's gone for the last 10 years. VJ hit play, and the screen lit up. I pulled out the library papers, holding them high. My warehouse is outside HOA boundaries, 12 feet, per county maps. Susan lied when she said it was theirs. Linda Brooks gasped. No way, they checked. I turned to her. They faked it. And this HOA's facing a $120,000 fine for improper storage, due Tuesday. I slapped the Triad Construction quote on the table. Here's a $50,000 bid to build a new shed, sent to Susan a day before she came to my house. But they didn't build. They wanted my warehouse to dodge the fine. The room buzzed. Susan slammed the table. This is slander, you can't prove it. I nodded to VJ, and last night's video flashed on screen. Susan and Mark appeared in green night vision, hauling financial records crates. Susan's voice echoed, if they find the Triad invoices we're sunk. Blame the old board if we have to. Mark replied, no one'll suspect. Carter's given up. The crowd erupted shouts, chairs scraping. Linda shot up, pointing at Susan. You lied to us. Susan paled but fought back. That video's fake. We've been transparent about storage needs. I gave a cold laugh. Transparent. Explain this. I held up VJ's hacked email. Susan and Mark plan to use my warehouse to pave the way for Triad Construction, Mark's brother-in-law's company. They want the vacant lot next door for housing, and the warehouse is the access. They faked boundaries, took my property, and used your dues to get rich. Mark jumped up. You can't prove anything. But VJ stepped forward, handing over a stack. Here's the padded Triad contract, $40,000 for consulting, no work done, and $60,000 in park renovation funds missing. Residents roared, demanding Susan resign. Ellen yelled, I trusted you for Christmas lights, and you scammed me. Susan banged the table again. Order, we had a deal with James. No, I said, sliding my lawyer's letter across the table. VJ helped me contact him this morning. My attorney demands you clear your stuff from my warehouse by the weekend. And this, the video went to the county prosecutor this morning. They're investigating. The room exploded again. Susan and Mark edged toward the door, faces gray. Ruth, quick as a whip, blocked them. Cops are outside, she said, voice icy. They want to talk about the missing funds. The doors swung open, and 2 officers stepped in. Susan Hayes, Mark Hayes, come with us. Susan spun to me, eyes blazing. You'll regret this. I stared her down. No, you'll regret cutting down my tree. Residents cheered, some shouting, good job, James. VJ clapped my shoulder as Susan and Mark were led out. Linda approached, voice low. You tricked us to catch them. I shook my head. No, Linda, they tricked us. I just brought the truth. As people filed out, I lingered, watching the screen still showing Susan in the warehouse. Uncle Henry kept it from developers, and now I'd saved it, not just for me, but for Pinewood Grove. But from Susan's last glare, I knew she wasn't done. I turned to VJ. We won this round. What about the next? He grinned. Let them come. You've got the whole neighborhood behind you now. After the HOA meeting, I stood outside the Pinewood Grove library, watching Susan and Mark get hauled into a police car. The sirens faded, but the air still felt heavy. VJ clapped my shoulder. You did it, James. They're finished. I nodded, but it didn't feel like the victory I'd pictured. Not over yet, I said. There's more to uncover. Emily ran out and hugged me, eyes bright but worried. You okay? Susan looked at you like she'd kill you. I gave a faint smile. She can try. But I've got the neighborhood behind me. The next morning, Pinewood Grove was like a battlefield after a storm. Neighbors clustered at mailboxes, whispering about the video I'd shown. Susan stashing crates, her voice cutting through the night. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mr. Jenkins called. James, for real? They stole park money? Ellen texted, I'm ashamed I trusted Susan. But not everyone was happy. Linda Brooks stood in front of my house, arms crossed. You turned this place upside down, James. Who's running the HOA now? I sighed. They scammed us, Linda. I just exposed it. She walked off, muttering something about troublemakers. That afternoon, the county prosecutor, Lisa Grant, called me to her office downtown. I brought the video, VJ's emails, and Ruth's documents. Grant, a stern woman with short hair, reviewed everything, scribbling notes. This is solid evidence, Mr. Carter, she said. Fraud, falsified records, maybe money laundering through Triad Construction. But do you know how much you risked? I nodded. Susan cut down my tree, took my warehouse. I had no choice. She gave a slight nod. I'm opening a formal investigation. We'll search the Hayes house and HOA office. You willing to testify? Absolutely, I said, without hesitation. Days later, it hit the news. Police raided Susan's house on Elm Street, hauling out boxes of files. VJ helped me sift through his hacked emails, padded Triad contracts, shady transfers to Mark's personal accounts. Emily sat beside me, reading the local paper, Pinewood Grove HOA scandal, tens of thousands missing. She looked at me. You started a war, how's it feel? I shrugged. Like Uncle Henry, he kept the warehouse from developers, and I kept it from crooks. But not everyone was on my side. A group of Susan's allies gathered in the park, holding signs James Carter destroys community. Linda led them, shouting through a megaphone, he's tearing down the HOA to keep his warehouse. Vijay called me from his place. They're splitting, James. Half back you, half want you gone. I clenched my fists. Don't they see Susan stole their own money? Vijay sighed. They're scared of change. Easier to blame you than face facts. The investigation dragged on for weeks. I testified before Grant, recounting everything from Susan's first knock to the night I set up cameras. Vijay sent more audio files he'd recovered from the HOA system. Susan laughing with Mark Carter'll never know Triad paid us $200,000 to clear the way. I listened, blood boiling. $200,000, I muttered. They sold out the whole neighborhood to Mark's brother-in-law. Grant nodded. We found that invoice at Susan's house. They weren't just dodging a fine, they wanted the vacant lot for houses, to make millions. By the weekend, police had detained Susan and Mark. The news reported HOA couple faces fraud, money laundering charges. Pinewood Grove grew more divided. One night, I found my trash cans tipped over, a fake fine taped to the door. Get out, Carter. Emily hugged me from behind. They hate you because you're right. I turned, holding her hands. I don't care if they hate me. I care that we take back what was stolen. Vijay came over the next day, laptop in tow. Look at this, he said, opening a new file. Triad invoice to the city council. They wanted to expand Pinewood Grove through the vacant lot, and Mark signed off on it when he worked in planning. My jaw dropped. So the council's in on it too? Vijay nodded. Maybe, but not enough evidence yet. I looked out the window at the bare maple stump. Uncle Henry knew this. He said don't trust Pinewood, not just the HOA, but the whole Suits gang. I sat down, feeling both exhausted and determined. Susan and Mark were locked up, but a bigger scheme still lurked. What now? Emily asked. Now I take back the warehouse, I said. No HOA or council touches it. It's mine. Ours. Vijay grinned. You've got me, James. And half the neighborhood too. I nodded, eyeing the papers. Uncle Henry held the warehouse for 20 years, and I'd keep it, even if I had to fight the world. After Susan and Mark's arrest, Pinewood Grove fell into a quiet chaos. The investigation rolled on, but I felt the warehouse on Birch Lane was still an open wound, mine and the neighborhood's. One morning, I stood in the yard, staring at the maple stump, when Linda Brooks approached. She walked slowly up the path, no longer the aggressive sign waver from last week. James, she said, voice soft. Can I talk to you? I crossed my arms, wary. What do you want, Linda? Another fake fine? She looked down, twisting her hands. No. I sorry, for everything the tree, backing Susan. I was wrong. I frowned, not expecting that from Linda, the woman who'd find me over a trash can 2 inches off. Why the change? I asked. She looked up, eyes red. I saw the video you showed. Susan fooled me, fooled the whole neighborhood. I thought I was protecting the community, but I was just her puppet. I stayed quiet, letting her go on. I was under pressure, James, Linda whispered. My husband lost his job last year. I joined the HOA for the free membership, to save on dues. Susan promised she'd help if I followed her. I didn't know she was stealing our money. I sighed, my anger easing a bit. You're not the only one she duped, Linda. But why tell me? She wiped her eyes. Because you were right. I want to make it up. I can't fix the tree, but I can help you. Help the neighborhood. Emily, listening from the porch, stepped out. Help how? She asked, voice skeptical. Linda took a deep breath. I know Susan left a mess of papers at the clubhouse before she was caught. I've got a key. I was her assistant. If there's anything proving Triad or the council's involved, I'll find it for you. I glanced at Emily. She gave a slight nod. Okay, I said, but I'm coming with. I'm not letting you trick me again. Linda nodded. I get it. You've got every right not to trust. That afternoon Linda and I went to the clubhouse, a small building by Pinewood Grove's park. Inside, the musty smell rose from old carpet. Linda led me to a back office, unlocking a file cabinet. Susan kept everything here, she said, pulling out a stack. I sifted through Triad receipts to the HOA, a $30,000 invoice for consulting services, and a letter from the city council approving the vacant lot expansion. Look at this. I pointed to Linda. Mark signed this in 2018, when he was in planning. They've been scheming for years. Linda shook her head. I had no idea. I just followed Susan's orders, organizing the warehouse, finding people. I was awful. I set the papers down. You were manipulated, Linda, but now you can fix it. She nodded, eyes lighting up. I'll give this to you. Use it to protect the warehouse, protect us. I stuffed the papers in my pocket, feeling the first relief in weeks. Thanks, I said, still cautious. But why do this? Aren't you scared of Susan's revenge? Linda gave a sad smile. She's done, and I'm tired of being afraid. I want to live here without shame. I nodded, getting it. Linda wasn't just making amends with me, she was making amends with herself. As we left the clubhouse, I turned back. You could help more. I'm turning the warehouse into something for everyone, out of the HOA and council's reach. You in? Linda blinked, surprised. You'd trust me after everything? Not fully, I said honestly. But I trust you want to change. That night I told Emily and VJ everything. VJ laughed. Linda flipped. Didn't see that coming. Emily crossed her arms. She could be acting. But if she's real, she's a good ally. I nodded. She knows the HOA inside out, could keep us out of trouble later. VJ opened his laptop. I sent Linda's papers to Grant. If the council's involved, the investigation's growing. I looked out the window, thinking of Uncle Henry. He kept the warehouse from developers, and now I had Linda, an unlikely ally, to keep it from corruption. A few days later, Linda showed up with a box of homemade cookies, setting them on my kitchen table. Thanks for giving me a chance, she said. I gave a faint smile. Don't thank me yet, we've got work to do. She nodded, and for the first time, I saw hope in her eyes, hope that Pinewood Grove could heal, piece by piece. After Linda handed over the papers and pledged to make amends, I knew the warehouse on Birch Lane couldn't just sit there like a battlefield. Susan and Mark were locked up, the investigation pressed on, but I wanted to turn it into something good, not just for me, but for Pinewood Grove. One night, I sat with Emily and VJ at the kitchen table, spreading out Uncle Henry's map. I want to make it a community center, I said. No HOA, no council, a place that's truly ours. Emily's eyes lit up. Great idea. But how? VJ grinned. You've got me here. And Linda too. I started planning. The warehouse needed clearing, neighbors' stuff still clogged it from Susan's takeover. I emailed residents, anyone wanting their stuff from the warehouse, pick it up by Friday. After that, it's the community's. Saturday, I stood outside the warehouse, watching people come. Mr. Jenkins took his bike, Ellen her Christmas lights. Linda showed up with a broom. I'll help clean, she said, voice firm. I nodded. Thanks, we start here. Emily designed the layout: tool library in the east corner, meeting room in the center, and a small coffee nook by the door. It'll be cozy, she said, sketching on paper. VJ brought shelves from his company, donated free. Call it a neighborhood contribution, he winked. I pulled out Uncle Henry's old stuffed tables, chairs, tools to reuse. A week later, we started painting. Linda brought yellow paint cans, standing with me by Unit 8, where Susan once hid crates. This color's cheerful, she said. I smiled. Fits for erasing bad memories. We painted together, the smell of paint drowning out the old dust. Residents pitched in. Mr. Jenkins brought an armchair from home. Ellen donated a coffee maker. Don't need Christmas lights anymore, she said. But I want this place alive. VJ set up Wi-Fi, making the warehouse a real hub. One afternoon, Ruth from the library came with old books. For the tool library, she said. Communities need to learn from each other. I looked around, watching the warehouse turn into what I'd dreamed, not an HOA dump, but Pinewood Grove's new heart. Then one morning, I found an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a $115,000 check and a note, for the tree. I'm sorry, Mark. I froze, showing Emily. Mark sent this, she asked. Maybe guilt got him, I replied, unsure. I took the check to a nursery, bought 20 young maples. We'll replant, I told Emily. Not just for our house, but all over Pinewood Grove. She smiled. You're building a legacy. The next Saturday, I held the grand opening, Birch Lane Center. Nearly 100 people came, kids running on the cleared lot, adults holding coffee from the new nook. VJ turned on a speaker, and I stepped up. This isn't mine, I said, voice carrying over the mic. It's ours. No HOA, no council, just Pinewood Grove together. Residents clapped, some yelling, thanks James. Linda stood beside me, eyes bright. I didn't think I'd be part of this, she whispered. I patted her shoulder. You earned it. That afternoon we planted trees. I grabbed a shovel, dug a hole in our front yard, remembering the old maple Susan cut. Emily and the kids helped, dirt smearing their hands. VJ led a group planting in the park, where Susan once promised upgrades she never delivered. Linda carried water, darting between crews. Ellen smiled at me, as we set the last tree. Look at the kids, they'll grow up with these like yours did before. I nodded, warmth spreading through me. That night, I stood in the center, looking around. Shelves held tools, the meeting table gleamed, coffee scented the air. Emily took my hand. Funny how it worked, she said. You inherited an old warehouse, and now it's this. I laughed. Lesson in misplaced kindness. But Susan couldn't kill the community idea. VJ joined, coffee cup in hand. Prosecutor called. They found more triad evidence at Mark's. Might tie to the council. I nodded. Good. But I'm focused here now. The Birch Lane Center opening done. I stood outside the warehouse, now a living place, watching neighbors leave in Pinewood Grove sunset. Kids darted around the young maples we'd planted. Adults chatted, cups in hand from Emily's little nook. I felt dirt under my nails, sweat dried on my brow, but my chest was light. VJ sidled up, grinning. Look what you pulled off, James. From a mess to this. I shook my head. Not me, all of us. Emily stepped out from the center, taking my hand. Funny how it went, she said, voice warm. You inherited a beat-up warehouse, and now it's the neighborhood's heart. I smiled, recalling the day I nearly choked on the lawyer's letter. Uncle Henry didn't see this coming, I said, but he kept it from developers, and I made it something he'd be proud of. I thought of his note, "Don't trust Pinewood," and realized it wasn't just a warning, it was a call to act, one I'd answered. The next morning, I walked around Pinewood Grove, seeing the young maples standing tall on land Susan once wrecked. Kids ran by, lugging watering cans too big for them, laughing as they soaked the trees. Ellen stood near the park, bossing them like a stern grandma. "Don't drown them, little ones," she yelled, then turned to me with a smile. "Thanks, James. The neighborhood's alive again," I nodded, warmth spreading. People who hadn't spoken in years were laughing together, and I knew we'd pushed past Susan's shadow. VJ called me at noon. Prosecutors got news, he said. They found triad contracts at Mark's, linking 2 council members. Investigations widening. I frowned. The council for real? VJ laughed over the line. Uncle Henry was right. Pinewood's untrustworthy, but you've changed some of it. I hung up, thinking of Mark and Susan. Mark's $115,000 check didn't buy back trust, but it gave us new trees, a small start I'd take. Linda stopped by that afternoon, small suitcase in hand. I'm leaving, she said, standing on the porch. Sold the house, moving in with my sister, no HOA there. I smiled. Sounds nice. You okay? Linda nodded, eyes brighter than before. Yeah, I painted the center, helped plant trees enough to feel I'm not useless. Thanks for trusting me, even a little. I shook her hand. You did more than make up, Linda. Good luck. She gave a real smile, then walked off, dragging her suitcase down the street. I watched, wondering if my kindness to Susan that first day led her here, a twist I hadn't seen coming. That night I sat with Emily on the porch, eyeing the young maple in our yard. What are you thinking? She asked. I took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill my lungs. About Uncle Henry. He kept the warehouse because he didn't trust Pinewood, and I nearly lost it because I trusted Susan. But now I see what he didn't say. Sometimes you fight to hold what matters. Emily tilted her head. And if they hadn't taken the warehouse, would we have this center? I shook my head. Probably not, but I'm glad they pushed me too far. It made me stand up. I replayed it all. Susan's knock trucks clogging the warehouse, the chainsaw on my tree, the late-night video, her glare as she was led away. I'd been angry, scared, but now I saw, misplaced kindness got me trapped, but trust in the right places. Emily, VJ, Linda, the neighborhood, pulled me out. What'd you learn? Emily asked, her hand slipping into mine. That the strongest thing I gave wasn't the warehouse or money, I said slowly. It's the guts to say enough when things go wrong. Days later, I stood at Birch Lane Center, watching residents use it, Mr. Jenkins borrowing a saw, Ellen hosting her book club, kids playing on the lot. VJ came up, clapping my shoulder. Know what surprises me? He said. One guy standing up fixed something we thought was broken forever. I shook my head. Not one guy, all of us. Susan wanted to break it, but we built it back. He grinned. So you won. I looked around Pinewood Grove, imperfect, still healing, but alive with new possibility. Uncle Henry left the warehouse as a test, and I turned it into a gift, not just for me, but for everyone. We won, I said to VJ, then turned to Emily watering a tree nearby. And we'll keep it, no matter what they try next. She smiled, water splashing her hands. Fresh start, I replied, the ground under my feet feeling firmer than ever. I don't know if the council will fall or if Susan will come back, but I know one thing. Pinewood Grove found its voice, because I spoke up. And every day watching those maples grow, I see Uncle Henry in them, not just the warehouse keeper, but the hope keeper. The story reflects many real-life facets of modern America, especially in suburban neighborhoods, where homeowners associations HOAs often wield significant control. James Carter faces Susan Hayes' abuse of power, and a corrupt scheme tied to Triad Construction's real estate project, a scenario not unlike real accusations against some U.S. HOAs for misusing dues, or colluding with local government for profit. Susan cutting down James's maple as revenge echoes actual property rights disputes, like when HOAs enforce strict landscaping or architectural rules. The split in Pinewood Grove, after James exposes the truth, also mirrors today's polarized U.S. society, where hidden truths spark conflict between those seeking change and those fearing instability. The story's lesson for real-life America is don't shy from fighting injustice, but build alliances and patience for lasting change. James didn't just rely on VJ's evidence or warehouse cameras to topple Susan. He leaned on Emily's support and Linda's redemption to turn the warehouse into Birch Lane Center, a symbol of unity. In American life, where individual rights are prized but vulnerable to groups like HOAs, you need to gather facts, like James researching county maps, find allies like VJ and Linda, and turn hardship into opportunity, like James planting 20 maples with Mark's check. Plus, James forgiving Linda reminds us that even in conflict, giving others a chance to fix wrongs can heal a community, a key value in American culture that champions renewal and hope. Act with a bigger goal, not just self-defense, but building something better for all. If you liked the story of how I turned an old warehouse into a community center and exposed the HOA's scam, hit subscribe to catch the next battles with Pinewood Grove suits. Thanks for joining me, and see you in the next video to find out if this neighborhood really stays as peaceful as I hope.